It was just another day in paradise for the bright new superstar. She was a world-famous singing sensation who everyone adored. Everything unfolded seamlessly, perfectly as planned. The final concert of her world tour concluded without a hitch, culminating in a breathtaking finale that left her audience in awe. An explosion of dazzling lights and cascades of vibrant confetti painted the night sky. Her shimmering designer catsuit accentuated her stunning hourglass silhouette, while her dance was nothing short of perfection, each movement fluid and mesmerizing. With her warm, angelic voice soaring above the symphony of emotion and melody, she captivated her loyal fans anew. She was Tara, the Queen of Song, a bright star whose brilliance shone unerringly through every note, through every spectacular moment. "What a performance, Tara! They loved you!" Sophia Wiseman, her manager, exclaimed as she enveloped Tara in a motherly hug as she finally made it backstage after the encore. "Thanks, Sophia." After changing into something more comfortable in her dressing room, Tara could finally go home to rest. She was greeted by her bodyguard, Drake Rosh, as she opened her dressing room door. A man with a crew cut swaggered towards them. Drake turned towards the man, narrowing his eyes. "Lost? The exit's that way," Drake warned sternly. As the man passed, he eyed Tara through slits steadily. She drew closer to Drake as her eyes fell on the man's spider tattoo. "You all right, Dawn?" Drake asked Tara. "Fine. Just want to get home," she replied, putting on her best smile. Drake led the way, and they escaped the bright lights and the adoring, whistling crowd. Tara was whisked away in her brand-new gold Mercedes to her home. She was glad that her concert had been on home ground. There were no planes to catch, nor hotel rooms to sleep in for a change. She sat back on the big, comfy back seat. The smell of new leather in a luxury vehicle was the smell of success. In that moment, her life was perfect. She was perfect. "We're almost there. I'll see you in, Miss Bloom," Drake Rosh, her bodyguard, said. "It's all right, Drake. You can just park the car. Sly is at home." "I'll be fine," Tara said. Tara's almond-shaped green eyes, framed by perfectly curved natural brows, gazed pensively out of the window. The memory of what had happened with her fiancé, Sly Gabler, took her out her perfect moment. Her unwavering eyes were perfectly still in the flash of lights passing by. Like a deer caught in the headlights of a car, she gazed vacantly before her, vivid memories flashing through her mind. How had an intruder managed to get into her home so easily without setting the alarm off? The man had been lying on his stomach in her basement. His face had been turned towards her. The face of the Chinese man had borne the haunting marks of his final moments, frozen in a grimace that had captured the essence of sheer terror. His eyes, wide and glassy, had seemed to scream a silent plea, as if surprised by the betrayal of life. His irises had been dulled, pooling in darkness, as though the light of hope had been extinguished. A faint crimson stain had marred the pristine fabric of his white shirt, marking the spot where the blade had pierced. The vivid splash of color had told a silent story of a violent death. His neck had held a tautness, like a coiled spring, caught in an eternal moment of tension. The man's skin, a pale shade caught between life and death, had been slick with a thin sheen of perspiration that glimmered faintly in the dim light, emphasizing the sharp lines of his face. Each contour had appeared chiseled, marred by the pallor of fear. The thin, craggy lines around his mouth had twisted in a ghoulish semblance of an expression, lips slightly parted, as if to let out a cry that had never escaped his throat. His spirit had been reduced to an echo of horror, etched into the canvas of his lifeless face. Sly had told her how lucky she had been, how he had been there to protect her. Sly had told her that if he had not been there, the intruder would probably have killed her. He had told her that he would sort it all out. Everything would be all right. He would take care of things, and she had believed him, as always. He had been insistent that they should not phone the police nor tell a living soul, as the police would never have believed what had happened. It was strange how the room had smelled faintly of cigar smoke. Had she imagined it? Tara was taken out of her frightening memory and drawn back into the moment by Drake's voice. "Got to do my job, Miss Bloom. Some of the messages that those crazy fans send are a bit strange," he said. Tara laughed beautifully, wiping away her frown and her tumultuous thoughts. Her fresh, dewy face glowed in the dim street light that was shining in through the car window. Her warm beauty was like a fragrant, fragile rose in the concrete jungle. "Some of my fan mail can be a bit strange, but luckily I haven't had mail from any complete psychopaths yet," she said, smiling. "Well, I'd rather see you in and know that you're safe," Drake said. Drake knew deep inside that it was not her fans that she had to be careful of. Drake Rosh had been employed by Tara when she had risen to stardom 2 years earlier, and he took care of the 20-year-old as though she were his own daughter. He paused for a minute before speaking again. He had to broach the subject carefully, but tact was unfortunately not his forte. "Mr. Gabler will no doubt have a celebratory party for you," Drake said, as he lifted his eyebrow and glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Sly Gabler, Tara's fiancé, was known for throwing lavish parties. Somehow, every strumpet in town seemed to be at his soirees. All Tara wanted after a concert was rest, but she always had to make a brief appearance at his parties. She sighed at the thought of seeing the same crowd, drunk, loud, and reckless. At first, she'd found entertainment in the scandals, whose wife was cheating on whom, and so forth. But over time, his parties had become monotonous. "So, is your and Mr. Gabler's wedding still set for April, Miss Bloom?" Drake blurted out. Tara turned her face away from the car window, where the passing traffic and street lights had been slowly lulling her senses. Her eyes fell on the back of her bodyguard's fiery red-haired head. He was an intrepid man, who dared to stomp in where angels feared to tread. "Yes," she said simply, her tone curt, more than enough to tell anyone to drop the subject. Yet Drake was not just anyone. He genuinely cared. "So, may I ask if you're happy, Miss Bloom?" he asked. "No," Tara said, and then paused for a few seconds. Realizing her slip, she added, "No. No. I think it's a bit forward of you to ask me such a question. Besides that, my voice is tired. I don't want to talk right now." Tara folded her arms. There was very little that she could hide from Drake. He instinctively read her, like a book. Drake knew that something was up. There was something that Dawn Bloom was not telling him. He knew Tara's tenacious side as well as her weakness. She gave her all to her singing career and was remarkably talented. She would not rest until everything was just right. He also knew her vulnerable side. He knew the side of her that people like Sly Gabler liked to manipulate. She trusted him so easily. Tara saw the world from her glittering stage, where everyone adored her and there was no thought of malice. She may have traveled the world and could speak 3 languages, but she had never dealt with deceit. Heartache and loneliness she knew, but the bitterness of betrayal was something that she had never tasted. Drake smiled. "My apologies," he retreated, but not for long. "Do you know what I think you need, Miss Bloom?" he asked. "What do I need, Drake?" "You need a man who values you," he said, waiting for the retort. "That will do, Drake," she said slowly, and with warning in her voice. "All right, here we are." Drake changed the subject and smiled with satisfaction. Perhaps he had gotten through to Dawn Bloom. "I'll get the door for you," Drake said as he switched the car off, energetically swung his door open, and sauntered around the car to open Tara's door. He walked her to the front door. As he had predicted, they were welcomed yet again by the raucous sound of intoxicated voices, loud music, and intermittent, boisterous laughter. "You're back," Sly stated. His ice-blue eyes looked down at her as she stood on the steps. On the outside, she appeared unfazed by his cool greeting. Sly just had a lot on his mind after the incident in the basement. Things would change. She just had to give it time. She just had to stand by him, trust him. If she were just her radiant self, if she smiled brightly and made as if she didn't notice the change in him, he would warm up again eventually. She tried so hard to ignore the still small voice that told her that Sly had changed long before the night that she had stumbled upon him leaning over the dead man's body in the basement. Sly looked past her. His frosty eyes met Drake's. That glorified taxi driver was getting far too close to Tara for Sly's liking. It did not matter that much to Sly anymore, though. Very soon, no one would want her. No one wants a dead pop princess, no matter how beautiful or popular. Sly pasted on a smile beneath his cold eyes. "Come and join us by the pool once you're dressed in something a bit more appropriate," he said, as he looked her up and down from her perfect ponytail to her comfortable pumps. Why couldn't she dress a bit more sexy when she was off stage? Her sister, Evelyn, did perhaps look a bit trashy at times, but at least Evelyn knew how to look good. To tell the truth, Evelyn did not look good at all. She looked rather naughty, and that was just the way he liked it. "I think I'll rather just go to sleep tonight." "My voice is tired," Tara said, trying her best to smile. She had noticed his eyes boring into Drake's. Was it jealousy behind those eyes? They seemed even more cold than usual, but she was too tired to analyze what was going on behind his frosty gaze. "Suit yourself," Sly said. His nonchalant reply caught Tara's attention. Something was different. He was normally adamant that she should make an appearance with him, like a trophy. Sly turned to leave, then looked back at her. "I hope you haven't told anyone," he said. "Of course not," she replied defensively. "You know you're being watched, Tara." "I'm not going to prison for no one. You know that I love you, Sly." Sly sniggered at her. "Sometimes I think you'd make an even better actor than me. No stage fright. Only thing that frightens you are spiders," he said. "I'm too tired for this, Sly. Funny thing about tarantulas, they have 8 eyes. They have eyes everywhere." Sly turned his back and walked like a lion to the pool area. "Don't wait up for me." "We have guests," he said over his shoulder. Tara ascended the ornate winding staircase, went through her bedroom, and escaped to the safety of her dressing room. With the clink of the door handle, she shut the world out. She could breathe again. She pulled the elastic out of her hair and let it tumble down freely over her one shoulder. At last, she could be herself. Tara, the queen of song, could rest. She was a person again, and not a commodity. She was just Dawn Bloom. She stood there, her eyes fixed on the gleaming door handle that kept the world at bay. Then, almost imperceptibly, she felt it, something gentle and weightless, slipping onto her shoulder, creeping upward along her neck. Breathing. A presence lingered just behind her, breaths whispering in the space between them. She caught the faint scent, an intoxicating blend of poison's elusive allure and a warm, lingering brandy breath wafting over her shoulder. It could be only one person. "Evelyn? How did you get into my room?" Tara said, eyes wide open. "You gave me the fright of my life." Evelyn appeared to be inebriated again. "I just came to say good night," she said, emotionless. There was something strange, something creepy about the way she stood perfectly still, staring at her vacantly. Was it really Evelyn, her sister? Or was it something darker? A nightmare come alive? Evelyn smiled sardonically and whispered, "Good night forever, Tara." Like a lamb to the slaughter, Tara was caught off guard by the unexpected attack. She did not even struggle. The needle stabbed into the soft inner flesh of her slender arm. As she stumbled backward, she felt the strange, uncontrollable rush. Her face was a mask of bewilderment, her features frozen in a mixture of shock and disorientation. Her eyes, once bright and full of life, stared blankly ahead, their usual sparkle dulled by a veil of confusion. Her eyebrows, usually so expressive, curving pleasingly to the form of her smile, were furrowed and tense, as if trying to make sense of the chaos within. What was happening to her? Evelyn's dark eyes bore through her, a twisted smirk of satisfaction on her face. Her vindictive eyes, as black as her hair, glinted crazily in the dimmed light. They were deranged eyes that relished watching the rush turn into nausea, as though watching some strange and fascinating experiment. "What? Why, Evelyn?" Tara asked, perplexed. In the moments before darkness stole her senses, something arose in Tara's mind. In the dissipation of logic, intuition was finally allowed to seep through for just a few moments. Was what was happening to her and the dead man who had been in her basement weeks earlier connected? First a lifeless body in her basement, then an attack by her own sister. The questions spiraled through her mind, like a whirlwind. In those moments, another thought occurred to her. She had comfortable tights and a t-shirt on. She had not a shred of makeup on. What if she died? What if the press arrived? She did not want to die like this. It had to be perfect. She had to at least look presentable as she drew her last breath. Tara decided there and then, as darkness took over her senses, that this would not be the final curtain. Somewhere on the M6, the morning after. Perhaps, if she had stayed on the other side of that door, she would not have been unconscious and presumed dead, lying on the back seat of her own car. They would not have been taking her body away, so that they could toss it into the ocean. Sly Gabler watched, cool as a cat, from a distance as the car exploded. Evelyn, his adoring lapdog of a mistress, had a look of baffled bewilderment on her marshmallow-powdered face. Her false eyelashes flew open. "What are we going to do now, Sly?" she asked, her seemingly unconcerned hero, lips painted with the latest shade of cherry-pink lipstick. Not a muscle flinched on Sly's pampered face. His only sign of emotion was the rhythmic rapping of his ireful, manicured index finger on the steering wheel. It was not only his recent eyelift surgery that made it difficult for him to show emotion. He generally kept his feelings under tight control. Feelings are for the weak or impulsive, and the weak never win. He wasn't cold and merciless. He was just sensible, pragmatic. To survive and get what one wants, one must be sensible. It's merely a matter of the survival of the fittest. Flames lashed out of the gulf that he had generously given to Tara for her birthday. Black balls of smoke billowed up against the pink-orange dawn sky, suffocating the one delicate star, still dimly attempting to twinkle in the heavens. Sly and Tara's engagement had been the juiciest showbiz news of the year just months earlier. The new vocal sensation had met her Prince Charming. She had given Sly just the boost that he had needed for his acting career, their union shooting him into stardom. He had preened on the cover of nearly every magazine. He had to share the stage with her, of course, but soon he knew he would have it all to himself. Offstage, Tara had really not been what he had expected after they had first met. He had to admit that she was exquisitely beautiful, probably the most beautiful woman he had met, but she just wasn't his type. Thankfully, she had spent so much time rehearsing that it had left him free to follow his own pursuits. He had been ever so polite to her stuck-up friends for months. In the end, the fame and fortune he had acquired was well worth it, but he was in dire need of a little bit of excitement. Evelyn kept him occupied, but he needed more. He needed more thrilling entertainment and an even more luxury lifestyle. All his needs could have been fueled by one thing: money. To the world, he was a celebrity actor, whose suave demeanor was so popular with the ladies. Few knew his past, and few cared to know. The mask of his photogenic face hid a very dark past. Luckily, he had eventually escaped the deep underbelly of society, where the law of the jungle prevails. Thanks to his good looks, he had transformed himself into a member of society. People rarely seemed to care to look beyond the mask. His dark past in the sinister underworld had given him contacts who could pull off any job, from getting fake documents to making dead bodies disappear. Sly and Evelyn watched from his car as the man dragged Tara further away from the burning vehicle and then attempted to check her vital signs. She really just deserved to die, didn't she? She brought everything down on herself. You warned her not to say anything about the 5 million rand that you won. You told her not to talk about what happened in the basement. Evelyn rambled on nervously. It was as though she were trying to convince herself. Sly didn't know what was more annoying: the failed attempt at getting rid of Tara's body or Evelyn's nattering little voice. He gripped the steering wheel. "She's not dead." He bit the words out. "Huh?" "I said," he enunciated, as though speaking to a 3-year-old, "she's not dead. She's probably just in a coma. You obviously didn't shoot her with enough." "Really?" "How do you know, Sly?" Evelyn asked her hero with adoring, heavily lashed eyes, as though he were the wisest being on earth. Sly didn't bother to answer her. He didn't want to waste energy on trying to educate Evelyn on taking vital signs. The man was obviously not medically trained and had, in panic, checked for a pulse before thinking to check whether she was breathing. The man would not have bothered to check if Tara was breathing if he had not detected a pulse. The heroin injection may have just put her into a light coma. Sly realized that he would have to find a way to make that coma permanent. He would miss the car more than its owner. Oh well, there would be plenty of money to buy 10 more like it. He just had to play his cards right. Sly glanced back over to where his fiancée's body lay. Who would have guessed that the 2 idiots hired to get rid of Tara's body would have been stupid enough to crash into an old Land Rover, her body still on the back seat? Who transports a body on the back seat of a car? They were supposedly the best that he could get to do the job. It was hard to get good help. They had had one simple job: dump the body into the sea. How hard could it have been to pull that one off? They had truly botched things up. On top of that, the meddling driver of the Land Rover they had crashed into had pulled Tara's body out of the back seat of the car just before it had exploded. Things were not going according to plan for Sly. Loose ends were developing. Complications had to be snuffed out. He just wanted the little nuisance who stuck her nose in his business out of the way. At some point, Tara would sing, and he could not allow that. He had already learned, by eavesdropping, that she had told her manager too much. Sly Gabler would not let anyone send him back to prison. He slinked away smoothly from the scene of chaos in his black Lexus. The risk of being seen at the scene of the accident was too great. Behind his cold, steely gaze, he formulated a plan to clean up the mess that Ophirin's two hired men had left. He had to make sure that the driver of that dilapidated Land Rover could never speak to the police. The man who had rescued Tara out of the car had seen Ophirin's men, Terence and Damien. He did not want anyone to be able to connect Terence and Damien, and therefore possibly himself, to Tara's unfortunate accident. Luckily, he could always count on Evelyn to be his alibi. She had no choice but to play along, as she was the one who had administered the drug to Tara. She had been the last person to visit Tara's room the previous night at the party. Sly had been shrewd enough to have made very sure that it was Evelyn, and not he, who had been the last person seen coming down the staircase out of Tara's room. His plan had been so simple: have Tara drugged and then have her body dumped in the ocean. If her body were ever found, it would look like it had been a suicide. That way, the likelihood of Evelyn being suspected was low, and he could possibly keep her as his faithful pet. She was convenient to have around. She was, however, just as every other female was, replaceable. He had planned to celebrate her death that evening at the casino, his most favorite place in the world. What a bummer. He would spend his evening hoping that Terence and Damien wouldn't be dumb enough to talk too much if found and questioned about the accident. His car knew the way to the casino well. Perhaps his luck would be better there. Zack lifted the woman's soft, delicate hand and felt for signs of a pulse. Her silky, sun-kissed locks glistened in the glow of the burning vehicle and teased playfully over her face in the light breeze. She looked like a young, sleeping goddess. They may have been in an emergency situation, but Zack could not have helped but notice, with one sweeping glance, that every part of the woman was very well arranged. He gently lifted back her eyelid and shone the light of his smartphone to check for a reaction. The sleeping beauty was clearly unconscious. She may have been unconscious, but the creamy skin of her fresh face looked so warm, so soft, so radiant. "Aren't you going to help? Do something, man!" he shouted at Terence and Damien, who stood nervously on the side. Why were the two men whom she had been with in the blazing car just standing there? Damien eyed him darkly. Both of the men's hair was crew-cut. Zack's eye fell on the spider tattoo on Damien's arm and then returned to his face. The atmosphere was so thick with tension, one could cut it with a knife. He returned his attention to the woman lying so still and serene. Then he heard scuffling behind him in the bushes nearby, and when he turned to speak to the two men, they had disappeared like mist before the sun. How had they vanished so fast? Moreover, why had they vanished into thin air? Zack sat up and turned to frown into the light of the morning sun. He would be late for his appointment. He did not like being late. He had work to do and bills to pay. The minutes before the ambulance came screaming down the long road felt like hours. At last, the flashing red light of the vehicle hurtled towards them. Hours later, Zack still sat at the hospital, waiting for some positive news. He told himself that he felt obligated to stay because of his involvement in the accident. He had not made it to his appointment, so an extra hour or two wasted wouldn't really matter. Perhaps it was his inquisitive nature that had made him wait. Perhaps it was the way that her soft tresses had felt in his hand as he'd lifted her neck to see if she was conscious. He was taken out of his reverie as a doctor approached him. "We have identified the woman, Dr. O'Connor," he said, reading Zack's business card. "Yes, I hold a Ph.D. too, Doctor, but I would not recommend that you take any medical advice from me. I'm an anthropologist. Please, call me Isaac." Zack smiled. "Aha," the doctor smiled. "We have identified her as Miss Dawn Bloom, whom you might know as the famous singer, Tara. You managed to crash into a real-life star." Zack frowned. "Tara?" he asked. "Well, she's just the greatest international singing sensation currently. Her latest hit, Sunshine, has been #1 on KFM radio for over a week now. She's on the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine at the moment, you know," the doctor said, looking at Zack as though he were born under a stone. "Wow." Zack smiled, trying to sound really impressed. "I crashed into a real celebrity. I'm just a humble anthropologist. I spend more time digging in the dirt and with my nose in books than paging through magazines," Zack said, his strong face spreading into a contagious smile and his unusual golden eyes creasing into laughter lines. He had the warm, wide sort of smile that could melt the coldest of hearts, could break the ice in any situation. "I must ask you not to breathe a word about her identity to anyone, Isaac. We don't want the media to descend on us. We will be moving Miss Bloom to a more private facility ASAP, so that she can be cared for without interruptions from the media or fans," the doctor said. "Of course," Zack said. "How long do you expect that she will be in a coma, doctor?" "I must prepare for an expedition, and I'm busy writing another book, so I'm quite busy. I'd like to stay informed about her condition, though, for the purpose of sorting out the insurance claim, of course." The doctor gave a knowing smile. Zack had shown genuine concern for the beautiful star whom he had seen and held in his arms, but never met. "Well, it's hard to tell at this stage. If you leave your number at the reception, then we can pass it on to the medical facility where she is being taken to so that they can keep you informed," the doctor said. "Thank you," Zack replied. After the unexpectedly eventful day, Zack asked the taxi driver to stop at the all-night cafe before going home and did something he had never done before. He bought his first-ever copy of Cosmopolitan magazine. At home, he sat down at his well-weathered desk and had a completely new reading experience. He read it from cover to cover. He mostly perused the front cover. So, that was what went on in the minds of women. After analyzing the female mind, he gazed blankly at the intriguing ornament on his desk. He had bought the supposed porthole when he was on an expedition in the far-off Astara, in Iran. He had not wanted to buy it. It did not even look like a porthole. The frame was made of brass, and it was very ornate. It was not something that would normally have interested him. The old man who had sold it to him had told him that it was a porthole that could take him wherever his heart desired to go. He had probably misunderstood the man's broken English. The place he really wanted to go was somewhere where he could understand what had happened that morning. Things just didn't add up. Tara had had no sign of head injury from the crash, yet she was in a coma. There were also the two mysterious men who had just disappeared. Zack looked at his desk, which was strewn with books and papers. He had to go to bed and get some sleep, but he found that he just couldn't. He had so much work to do, but his mind was elsewhere. He had a book to write. He had research to do for his new video. He needed a vacation, but he had to work. Instead, he just sat there, gazing at the porthole. It had been on his large old desk for over a year, gathering dust. It was quite aesthetically pleasing, but probably not worth the money that he had forked out for it. He had mounted it on a display on his desk. He drew it nearer and wiped the dust off its surface. The thick, opaque glass had a deep violet-purple hue. The glint on its rounded surface was green and yellow and blue, like oil on water, and it had a mesmerizing effect the longer one looked into its almost 3-inch depth. There was no way that the object was ancient, as the tour guide from whom he'd bought it had purported. It seemed to be, at the utmost, a few 100 years old, but no more. He inspected the back of the supposed porthole for the first time. Aha! Machining marks. If he'd noticed that before, he would never have purchased it. Oh well, perhaps the old man had needed the money. Then he frowned. He picked up his magnifying glass and inspected the marks more closely. His face lifted in surprise. They were not machining marks, but tiny letters. The text was in cuneiform. He focused intently, attempting to translate it. The door. 2. The stars, he mouthed. He straightened up and frowned. Door? Porthole? Portal? He recalled the words of the old man from whom he had bought it. Had the man meant portal instead of porthole? He sat back in his chair and laughed at the thought. Well, I should let Professor Wolf know about this. He'll find it very amusing. It's probably just some obscure, occult object, he muttered to himself. Best get some sleep. He put the porthole back on its stand. Just as he got up to go to bed again, the phone rang. Who would call him so late in the evening? It had to be important. Perhaps there was some news from the hospital. He answered the call groggily. Hello. Hello, Mr. O'Connor, a woman's voice asked. Yes, Zach answered. I need to speak to you urgently. I am Sophia Wiseman, Tara's manager. Where can we meet? Sophia said. After speaking to Sophia Wiseman, he got up to close the sliding door and went to bed. As he looked out one last time, he noticed it. A shooting star sailed silently across the lonely heavens. He made his wish.